Here, want to show you what we're going to be doing next, our next composition, which is composition in C, and we're going to write it using a melody in the piano right hand treble clef part, using chords in the piano left hand bass clef part, and also using electric bass in a separate part. So first of all, what you see here on the screen is the material we're going to use, the C major scale. We're in the key of C, so there are the notes of the C major scale. The first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh note. When we get to the C again at the top, we just call that 1 because C is 1. Okay? We're also going to build chords on each of those notes. So a chord built on the first note of the scale is the C major chord. And rather than use Arabic numerals for, as we do for note names, we use Roman numerals for chord names. So the chord built on the first note of the scale is the Roman numeral 1 chord. And you can see the bottom notes of these chords are the same notes you saw over here in the scale. In this case, it's only 1 through 6. We're not going to build a chord on 7, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But over here we have Roman numerals that are both uppercase, as in 1, 4, and 5. That represents a major type of chord. And lowercase Roman numerals 2, 3, and 6 that represent minor chords. This composition assignment is only going to use 1, 4, and 5, the 3 major chords. So let me get that out of the way. The instructions on the Canvas page ask you to open this Word document and to do the top part of the document, the score setup. So you're going to set up all the different parameters that are here, numbers 1 through 7, and then I would like you to make sure you watch all the way through this video before you go on and do the bottom part, the composition itself. Okay, so I have a nearly completed composition here that I want to show you. First of all, the instructions tell you to enter a 1, 4, 5, 1 chord progression. That will go in the bass clef of this bracketed piano part. So you have treble clef and bass clef. The left hand in bass clef is where the chords go. So there are those chords that we saw on the previous screen, where you have a chord built on the first note of the scale, the fourth note of the scale, the fifth note of the scale, going back to 1. So we call this a chord progression, 1, 4, 5, 1. I even put in parentheses the names of the notes in each of these chords so you can see them clearly. C, E, and G, F, A, and C, G, B, and D, and then back to 1. I didn't rewrite that. Once you get this 1, 4, 5, 1 entered correctly, select all of it. I clicked in the first measure, then shift clicked in the fourth measure, and Command C to copy it, and paste it down here in measures 5 through 8 because you're going to use the exact same chord progression twice. 1, 4, 5, 1. Okay? The second thing we're going to do is to build a bass line. I chose this pattern, though I would like you to create your own pattern. The bass line needs to use only the notes that are in the chord directly above it. So for this first measure, where we have a 1 chord built on C, E, and G, I'm using only C's, E's, and G's down here. You should use mostly C's, the root of the chord, with some G's. I would say don't use the middle note very much. It won't sound quite as good. So I took that pattern, and I'm going to take that and copy it and put it over here because I want to create the same pattern in the bass part in every measure. But now the C's and the G's don't fit this chord. So I'm just going to move it up to the F so that it does fit this chord. Now you can see it has an F and a C in there, and there are the chord tones. Do the same thing here and move it up so it fits that. And then I'll paste it here, and I don't need to move it because we're back on the 1 chord. I can now take this entire line, copy it, and paste it on the bottom because now it fits here. The other thing I'm going to change is this very last measure. I'm going to just put a half note there so it comes to rest and it doesn't keep going because that's the end of the piece. Then we're going to write our melody. And to write the melody, we're going to use notes from the chord plus, as it says in the instructions, what we call passing tones and neighbor tones. So I have chosen these notes right here. The letters beneath them represent the words chord, passing, or neighbor. They are not note names, okay? So the first note is an E, which is in the chord. So that's a chord tone. There's a G that is in the chord. There's another chord tone, and another G and another E. So those four notes are labeled with the letter C as in chord tone. They're in the chord. When I'm going from one chord tone passing through a different note on my way to another chord tone, then the note in between those two different chord tones is what we call a passing tone. When I go from one chord tone to a note that neighbors it and then come back to the same note I started on, then this is called a neighbor tone. So it doesn't mean that all Fs are passing tones or all As are neighbor tones. It depends what happens around it. But in general, you can see I'm moving by step. I'm only moving one letter to the next letter in the musical alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, with occasional small jumps like this one, where I jump from G down to E. Then I imitated it here, that same kind of chord note, neighbor and passing tones. All right. So I created a little bit of a melody here. I imitated it right here. Down here, I decided to embellish it a little bit. And now I want the piece to come to an end. So right here, this actually came from this. It's very related to that. I just took some of those notes and added notes around them. So I'm creating what we call motives or melodic themes, and I'm repeating them and developing them a little bit. The last thing we want to do is to add in our dynamics. So as I asked you in the previous video, click on the note, then Command E for expression. You see I get the cursor. Right beside that, I put in my dynamic. So I decided to start piano or softly. The next note, I'm going to type the letter L after I chose the next note, and I'm going to choose crescendo. And I'm going to draw that way over here. And by the time I get to this note, which this is now under, I want this one to be loud. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I chose the wrong thing. Let's say I got it really loud right there. All right, so that's how we add in dynamics. So that's the whole thing, guys. We have two measure phrases. You see each of these two measures kind of comes to rest in the melody. We have our chord progression, we have our bass line. Go ahead and have fun with it. And please send me an email if there's any trouble. If you want a little bit of extra help, we can have a Zoom conference and I'll help you out with it. Okay? Good luck and have fun with it.